Do you think that there is a cabal or a person on top, some person somewhere who knows?
I do. Remember that OSAP and ATIP took place on Skinwalker Ranch. That money was allotted to Bigelow for whatever was happening there. Bigelow sold the property. Why would he do that? It had to be that they found their answers.
I got love for the game. Bring it back to the golden age when the fresh beats knocked down.
Welcome to Raw and Relentless, the podcast. We got James Patrick here, who we've been talking about for a while. I was introduced to him virtually via email from Stacy Wright, who runs the Arizona and Phoenix MUFON. And you guys might remember her episode from a couple months ago at this point. And she basically said that James is a portal expert, the way she introduced him to me. And he has done work on Skinwalker Ranch. And was there another ranch that you do work at too?
There is, yes. Blind Frog Ranch, which is north of Skinwalker Ranch on the Uinta Basin as well.
Okay, so they're both in Utah.
Correct. They're both in northeast Utah.
Interesting. Well, around that time is probably around the time that I first even heard about Skinwalker Ranch. And I feel like in recent months, it's become more of a bigger phenomenon that more people have known about, as I feel like Joe Rogan has been talking about it a little bit. But I'm really fascinated because it seems to me like it's not like you can put your finger on like one thing about Skinwalker Ranch, like it's only UFOs or it's only Bigfoot or it's only a Skinwalker. It seems like it's a combination of a lot of unexplainable things. Is that accurate?
Sure. There's a lot of different paranormal events taking place there. And like you said, there's really no way to look for just one thing, because you may be there for maybe to look for a UAP and you end up seeing something completely different. Same with while they're there, they may have a certain expert on in some specific field, and something completely different happens, while they're researching or investigating that has nothing to do with their ballpark. So it's very interesting. And, just one of the few places here on the planet that you can actually almost count on within a certain amount of time, something occurring just that's, listed as paranormal.
And so I guess before we get too much into the weeds, did I describe what you do properly? Is that accurate? Or how would you describe what you do?
Sure. So, my background is in law enforcement investigation. So I've had a lot of criminal and civil law investigations, and education-wise, it's in anthropology and archaeology. So it's been really nice to fuse the two together. I'm researching and out there for the ancient, very ancient lost cultures or civilizations that information about them has been lost due to catastrophic events. And in the course of doing something like that, it obviously goes with or goes into other, events, and they melt together. And a large part of that just always seems to be in the realm of ufology, or, in the realm of cryptids or other paranormal events taking place.
Where did your interest in this all start? Was it from an academic perspective?
From that, and I guess everybody has, I wouldn't say everybody, but many people that I know have had some type of occurrence or event happen to them that, it makes them kind of shake their head and wonder what just happened. And, I've had that in my personal life before I was a police officer, while I was a police officer, certain things like that. And I guess the interest grew obviously from just trying to be able to explain what occurred. And I think that was actually, without really knowing, maybe what pushed me towards anthropology and archaeology, because, that allows you to kind of structure and investigate and research the past using different methods, not just scientific methods. Well, I guess the scientists would say it would have to all be a scientific method, but I think you have to kind of look outside of the box as well.
Interesting. And it is even more compelling to me that you have a background in law enforcement, because typically you think of a police officer, he's got to be the logical person. He's got to be the one who investigates and tries to get to the bottom of it, or at least plays a role in that. And do you feel like, I don't know, do you feel like an internal battle sometimes where your scientific brain is like trying to wrap around like some of this unexplainable stuff? And how have you dealt with that up to this point?
Sure. So just due to that reason, when I've written several books and I've stuck to fiction, even though several of them have a lot of real life events in them, just due to what you said. If you're in even in civil investigation, whether it was, you're doing some type of insurance fraud investigation or something in that regards, you're around a lot of people that were in law enforcement. So if I wrote nonfiction, I don't believe I would have had a job the next day. So it was, I always tell people I was personally disguising a lot of what occurred to me just due to the fact that I don't believe it would have helped me in my career. But I still wanted to tell the stories or explain what had occurred. But at the same time, I also enjoyed the fictional writing and being able to meld the two together and, create something out of what occurred. So, like the first book that I ever wrote, I would almost tell people that good 40% of it is from my life,
Wow.
events that took place in my lifetime.
Yeah. Would you mind kind of just going into like, what are some of those experiences that I guess, would you classify them as paranormal?
Yeah, they would. I always tell people when I was very young, I drowned, and I was actually not here, I guess you could say, for a good 7 to 10 minutes before I was found in a pool. And then it took a while.
It's a long time to be underwater.
Very long time. As a matter of fact, I had gone from a blue state to purple already. And it took a while to, get me out, resuscitate me. And I guess just from that point, from being so young, because it was before I was 2 years of age.
Wow.
And then just being able to recall absolutely everything from that point on as if I
Would you say that's one of your first memories ever?
It's exactly. I have perfect adult recollection is how I like to explain it to people from that point on. And I think from that, I've always felt that maybe the events that took place in my life were caused by that, or maybe it opened something up in that regard. So I had the fascination for it. And even though, I got into law enforcement, or I try to do a lot of science-based data point research and pull that in, I've always been open to other possibilities because, you always think about science of the past. What we know today, if somehow we took back then, they would think it was witchcraft to them, or currently what we know, we're still such a young species in this universe and galaxy that there's probably so much that we absolutely don't understand. And right now we classify that as paranormal, just being out of the realm of understanding it scientifically. And, other experiences I had as a police officer that
in Phoenix?
No, in Texas.
Okay.
And when it's happening, you just kind of like, what's going on. And then the issue or problem is, what do you do once something like that happens? And obviously my partner and I decided, not to discuss or talk about it other than what occurred. And in the report, it was just a simple incident report instead of going into those details.
Yeah.
And back in the 90s when I was, when this occurred.
What was it that occurred?
So we went to a domestic violence call, and we'd been to this house several times. The husband and wife were just fighting constantly. And it got to the point where it was almost becoming violent. They had 3 children. And that night we went again. My partner was pretty ticked off. He told them this is getting to the point where he was going to arrest both of them. So we walked in. He had the husband and wife there. He told them, call everybody in the house that's here. I want everyone in the living room. So he gathered what we thought was everybody in the living room. He was in the living room with them. I was still standing at the front door while it was closed, because to the left of that door was a staircase leading upwards. And I could still see my partner down the hallway, probably about 12 feet away from me. And he was standing in the entryway, so I could physically see all of him while they were sitting down. So I wasn't able to see them. But as he was telling them that this is the last time that we're coming out, next time we're going to go ahead and arrest both of you, put the kids into CPS, and we're going to put an end to it one way or the other if you guys can't figure it out. And as he was doing this, from upstairs, somebody yelled out, F you, just loud as could be. And
your thought as an officer is there's someone else in the house.
Someone else in the house.
Okay.
And my partner looks down at the husband and goes, I told you I want everybody down here. What part of that did you not understand? And then you hear several people upstairs just start screaming, get the F out of the house. I mean, it was just almost pure profanity. Mm. And while he's talking to the husband saying, what's going on? How many people do you have upstairs? I can't hear that conversation because it's starting to get louder and louder with more people. So at that point,
are you the only one hearing these voices?
No. Okay. Everybody in the house hears it. That's why my partner's talking to the husband, telling him, I told you to have everybody downstairs.
Yeah.
Why are there people upstairs? It gets so loud that though I can't start hearing my partner's conversation with the father. At that point, it sounds almost like there's going to be a confrontation between us and whoever's in the house. So I get on my radio and I request from dispatch backup units to that location. And I yell out to my partner, hey, I'm going to go up the staircase. So I pull out my mag flashlight and slowly start ascending the staircase. As I do it, it's only about 12 or 13 steps. And as I'm getting up there's no lights on. So it's a dark hallway that leads down, and all the rooms partitioned to the left or the right. But this was a home that was built in the 80s, and it had that old wood paneling, that faux wood that had all those ovals and circles in them. Mm. And as I got towards the top, it got so loud, the screaming and the
and it's like multiple voices?
Multiple.
Okay.
Probably to the point where it felt like I was in a nightclub, but of people that were angry and getting ready to fight. It was very confrontational.
Did it seem like they were yelling at each other or at you?
No, it was directed towards people, and those people that were downstairs, including myself.
Got it.
It's hard to tell you exactly because there was so much profanity being spewed in between everything. Obviously, my partner was pretty shaken up. He requested from dispatch that the units get here sooner. And so I think at that time they changed the code to code 3 for them to come, because they obviously knew there was, some type of duress going on in the house. I get up to the very top and I start walking down this dark hallway, because the only light was on in the living room, which was down at the other end of the house. Mm. And I noticed like this movement on the left and the right of me. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? I start getting ready for somebody to jump me. I lift up the mag light and I shine it on both sides of the wall. And there's these faces inside the wood where just the ovals in the wood should be moving and constantly watching and just yelling and screaming. And you just kind of stand there and you're like, you really have no idea.
So it's like the formations in the wood.
The wall, in the wood.
Are like faces.
Are faces yelling and screaming, and they're moving. They're not 3-dimensional. They're inside, but it still has movement. And I'm shining the light, and I'm like, what do I even do at this point? My partner's yelling up to me, and I just kind of blanked out. You don't know what to do. So he comes running up the stairs, thinking that something's already occurring. And I get up there, and he's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I pick up his flashlight and push it to where he can see, and he just goes pale, and he doesn't know what to do. And at that point, you can hear the 2 units pull up outside. You can start seeing on the edges of where the rooms are, the lights from the police units. And we're just standing there still. And it's so loud. And the officers come to the door. The moment they open up the door, everything just stopped.
Wow.
And the two of us are up there, and they're like, what's going on? What's going on? And quickly my partner said, you know what? It's our bad. They had a TV on super loud. Something was occurring. Yeah, we're code for it this time, go ahead and go back to it. And it always was very difficult for me to talk about something like that. And if we ever discussed something like that, I wouldn't have had a job the next day,
Wow.
And so
the person who would have hypothetically fired you had you talked about that, would that have been the police chief?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I would have never expected to go that far. With what we did was, we talked to the husband and wife. They said they've had issues like that occurring now for a few weeks. We told them, you got to obviously change something around here because we don't want to come back. And now more so than ever. And when we got out to the car, we just decided together that we were just going to write a DV incident report, and that was it. And we never ended up going back to the house after that.
So do you feel like in retrospect that the familial issues that had brought you there originally were caused by whatever was in the wood?
You know what? I don't know what was the causation. If if their anger and demeanor in the household maybe put out some type of energy, or if maybe there was an energy in that location that caused it in the opposite direction. I don't know. I just know that when you walked in, you could kind of feel just a heavy presence. But obviously there was a lot of anger issues between the husband and wife going on. And that's what we originally thought it was. And you kind of get that sense, when you walk into a house or whatever, in a situation like that. And it was a little more so that night. And I guess we found out why at the end.
How big were the faces?
They were all different sized. It depended on the oval or the circles inside the wood. It was as if the faces formed to whatever that was. And it was that faux wood paneling that they used to put into
like
the old
this
houses. Yes. Even cheaper.
Yeah. Interesting. And did the faces seem present in this reality to where they were speaking to you and reacting to, like, when the other police showed up, they were like, oh snap, and then they dipped? You think it was kind of like a reaction to that, or were they in their own kind of existence?
Well, obviously there was some type of interaction taking place, because as I moved up the stairs and started entering the hallway, it became worse. So they're knowing that my presence was there. That was obvious to me.
Yeah.
And the same with my partner, and the same with the husband and wife, because it was a 20-minute discussion that we had with them before we left.
Yeah.
But I can't answer your question because I just don't know that answer. But obviously that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in lost cultures, civilizations.
Yeah.
What was taking place here before that we don't understand, the paranormal, because at some point there's just got to be a breaking point to where we start figuring things out in regards to how we all interface with, whether it be different dimensions, and how that collapses, or are we talking about maybe a past, a present, and a future collapsing at one point, coming together? Who knows right now? I don't have that answer.
Interesting. So this, would you say, is like one of the defining moments, other than your near-death experience, that really sparked your intrigue into researching this kind of stuff further?
Yes.
Okay. And I feel like this is one of the things that you breezed on that I really wanted to, I guess, get more of your take on, which was like, what was that memory that you can recall now so vividly from when you had almost drowned?
Sure. So you always hear people when they have a near-death experience tell you they saw a light, or they saw their relatives, or something like that. They went somewhere else. That wasn't what I experienced. When I passed, I remember everything just getting darker and darker and harder to breathe. And I tried fighting to get up to the top of the water, and you could see the outside, you could see the sky, you could see the sun, but it was just blurry because of the water moving. And at some point I just gave up. And then I was just in nowhere. And when I try to explain that to people, it wasn't that, it wasn't nowhere. It was the fact that you no longer, or I no longer use the senses that we're aware of now. It almost felt like I was everywhere and that everything was connected. So you could sense, you could feel, you could not hear. You didn't have to hear anymore. It was like everything that has been here or alive or existed now all of a sudden existed together. And I have such difficulty explaining to you or to anybody because I have to use our five senses that we're aware of, and I don't know how to do that. I could feel other, it wasn't people, it was just other things everywhere, and could kind of know exactly at every moment what that was. And at some point then I remember starting to come back after they were resuscitating me, and that ability of being, I guess, like intertwined or all this togetherness was pulled. And then I started realizing and I started sensing, I started hearing again. I slowly started seeing. I could feel my, parts of my body as I came back. But I really didn't care to come back because it was like, just like you existed with everything at one time. And no matter who you knew or what you ever wanted, it was all there for you to understand and be a part of. That, I think that's the best way I can possibly explain it. So I never saw, physical bodies or people that you could recognize or lights or anything of that. It was just this.
Was it black?
Because there was no sight being used. It was just, I don't know how to explain it. There was no.
Was it more like an internal feeling?
Like that, like you were just suddenly a part of everything.
Do you remember it being a positive or a negative experience?
It was absolutely positive. You could feel negativity too. There was good and bad still. But I think that of how we see in reality, good or bad, I think it was a little different, and I don't know how to explain it.
I feel like I can somewhat understand your feeling now trying to explain it, only because, and this is a shot in the dark, and I know you're a police officer, but have you ever had a psychedelic experience where you've taken maybe a psilocybin mushroom or anything like that?
Not to that degree.
Okay. Have you, I guess, talked to anybody who has, and like kind of related your experiences? Have you found any commonalities?
So I rarely discuss this.
Okay. Interesting.
When I drown.
Okay. Is it because, why is that?
This is something
Yeah.
I mean, as I started getting more into researching the paranormal, and I'm no longer in some type of investigation, I've been more and more open to discussing it. And, after writing the book, now I'm able to come out and tell people, like at the shows, if I'm there at a show, a lot of times when I get to talk to somebody, I'll take Post-it notes and I'll put it in the book. This was really what took place, and this is what happened. This isn't real, and just sometimes you'll have a 30-minute conversation with somebody at the show. And I don't know, sometimes it feels good to be able to discuss it. But I'm still, slightly embarrassed about talking about things like that, just due to the fact that it was pounded into me for so long that that's taboo. You shouldn't be talking about that or events like that.
Yeah. When you were a child, did you ever try to relate this experience? And do you feel like maybe some of your hesitation to talk about it might be from experiences when you were younger where somebody was like, yeah, that's, don't think about that?
So no, I never really, I never even discussed it with my mother or father until about 5 or 6 years ago when I started writing, and I was like, you know what, this is the path I want to take. This is kind of the thing I want to do after being 25 years in some type of investigation. I want to get out there now, and cross over, not just the talk about cataclysmic events and lost cultures and civilizations, but I'm open-minded to both. I'm open-minded to the scientific method, which I do a lot when I'm researching and investigating with a lot of technology, because there's a lot of people, and I understand, that just refuse to believe it, or they feel like I did, like you're giving up a part of yourself and you're letting down your guard if you allow that to happen. So I get it. And to that, I'll give them what they need in data points. And then now I can be a little bit more open, and, as time goes by, like here I am, discussing it, it gets a little easier, and people go, oh, well, you're discussing it on the radio or, on a podcast. Because I think at some point, and I always tell people, I think that what we're researching or looking into, and these uncommon occurrences or atypical occurrences, at some point, there's got to be some type of origin or energy or something that is
a
causation,
force acting it.
A force, a causation for all of it to occur.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I guess one of the things that I was actually talking about on a previous podcast with Chris was like kind of the hard thing about the topic of anything that would be classified paranormal is if you have a scientific mind, or like the scientific process, it's hard to wrap your mind around a lot of this stuff, even if you've experienced it, because for it to be a scientific process, it has to be a repeatable experiment, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of the paranormal activities are like, you can't repeat this even if you tried.
And that's an excellent point. And a lot of people make it. And, you got to think too, that as a scientist, which I'm not, they've learned from someone that learned from someone that has the same information at some point. And like I said, 100 years ago, a lot of stuff seemed like magic that now is just known technology to us. And so I get it. I think we're now in a time that we understand that possibility more, and we have that opportunity. Think about your cell phone. Yeah. We have this onboard computer that can do what we saw in Star Trek, 40, 50 years ago, that we were like, science fiction. Now it's not. It's just the common day thing. And, when you come across these kids nowadays, they don't even think about the past, or that we didn't have it. It's just something that's in their life, daily usage, and it's always been there for them.
Yeah. Do you feel, and I guess this is kind of just around the topic of technology in general, but do you feel like at some point we will reach a technological point where we can start to explain a lot of the paranormal occurrences that we can't explain today?
Absolutely. And, paranormal just means something that's not explainable right now.
Yeah.
And think about too the fact that science, really, what is science? When we listen to the media, they're pushing it, or we have this point, or it's an agenda that we're supposed to take it as gospel.
Yeah.
And science has become a religion in and of itself. And the science of yesterday is no longer the science of today. So in 50 years, what we believe is real, or scientific or proven is just, it's a word that needs to be taken out of science, because everything that was proven before is now, well, not everything, but a lot of things that were proven in the past are now different. We're on a different paradigm, and it's getting harder and harder to shift, because, if you do that, people lose their grants, or they lose their ability to talk about it, teach it. And they've been doing it their whole life. So suddenly you're taking their livelihood away. And, I get that. I understand it.
Yeah.
It's hard to break through that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess I'm curious, being that you have a lot of interest in like ancient civilizations, lost cultures and stuff, how did that lead you to Skinwalker Ranch and your work there? And let's kind of go into some of that.
Sure. So I specifically look into a lot of Mesoamerican culture and civilization. I'm in Mexico a lot. When I was going to school, I focused on Mesoamerica. And as you do this, we realized that either moving upwards or downwards, a lot of the indigenous people started out in Central America and moved upwards, or it could have been the opposite way, like the Azteca probably started out in the Southwest and moved down into Mexico and absorbed other indigenous people like the Hohokam, maybe the Mogollon. Those that stayed later became bands that we have around us today. But a lot of that, as they moved southward, moved and turned into the Azteca. And the Aztec weren't specifically a people. They were a nation of all these different tribes that would be conquered, and they would break away and reconquer. But a lot of what's in the Mesoamerica area is in the desert Southwest. So I was up in northeastern Utah focusing on petroglyphs and pictographs. And you look at these three groups. One group is the Fremont, the other is the Barrier Canyon style, and then there's a third which they've labeled unknown because they're that unknown. There's very few artifacts to really point to who they were, or sites that you can say, because like Barrier Canyon, they get their name from where artifacts were found. We don't know who they were. But in the petroglyphs and pictographs, you look around, like if you and I were to make something right now, we would draw cars because that's in our life, our cell phones, our TV, our friends, our house, grass, the lakes. We would draw what we see around us. This culture focused in on just a few things, and most of them were anthropomorphic, meaning there were figures, whatever they were, that just didn't make sense. And you got to ask yourself, where's all the regular stuff? Why were they so focused on so few subject matter? And it got me to thinking, and you look at some of this stuff and you're
Are these like alien looking creatures?
Okay, you said it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you look at this and you're like, from what I see on TV now, this thing looks like a gray. What would somebody classify as a gray alien, or that looks like a man that has an ant's head on it. Just crazy. Or this is a giant. I mean, this petroglyph has, 6 toes on each side, huge feet. It's representing a giant from a lost culture that lived here. And I was aware of Skinwalker Ranch. I'd heard about it, but I was no expert at the time. Didn't even know that it was on the Uinta Basin. As I started interviewing the tribes that were there, specifically or most the Ute, which are made up of, Northern Ute are made up of several bands that have created that nation now. And they start talking about the skinwalkers. And I understood, I'm into folklore and the mythology. I know what the Yinablushi, which are the shape-shifting skinwalkers that practice Adagash. I get that. But then they start telling you, there's this ranch where all this stuff happens. Very few of us go on it. It's in the path of the skinwalker. And suddenly I'm like, what? So there's atypical occurrences happening, and I see atypical subject matter all around me. So over time, you're like, you know what? This thing's been happening for thousands of years. Paranormal events have been taking place, and the subject matter that's being shown, it was so outstanding and bizarre to them because they don't see planes every day flying around and helicopters, and So for them, I mean, you're talking about a phoenix or a fire god or a bird flying in the sky, or if it's up high, they see crosses flying around, or other different types of subject matter. And you got to kind of pull yourself out of the box of what my anthropology or an archaeology professor would tell you and say, you know what, maybe what they told me that possibly represents, because the only person that knows what the subject matter is about is the artist. When you look at a petroglyph, you know two things. Its location and what it looks like in its forms. Is it a hexagon? Is it diagonal? Is it a figure 8? you can tell what the shape is, but you can't say what the subject matter is. But after you start seeing so much of it, and then things that should be drawn or painted missing, I started thinking, you know what? Maybe these events were over a long period of time. Let me look at it from not just a perspective of it representing what we know, but maybe what we don't know or don't understand or lost historical data on. So that's then where I meld the two, the lost cultures, the lost civilizations. Because you know what? The answer is not always a UFO. The answer is not always interdimensional. A lot of what a lot of people miss, or the point is, there could have been civilizations that existed on this planet 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million years ago, 100 million years ago. We only say, 15,000, 18,000 years ago, prior to the interglacial period, these people were here. The Anunnaki, you hear, the Nephilim. Well, they were only here maybe if they existed 280,000 years ago. What existed 100 million years ago, and from catastrophic events or just geologic changes, we've lost that historical data. What technology did they have that could possibly still be underground, still functioning, or did us mining, causing seismic activity have reactivated, have opened? And I'll tell you what, that Uinta Basin is just riddled with underground tunnel system, caverns, mines. And you got to ask yourself, why? Well, I'm starting to lean towards that there was a meteor asteroid impact at the time where it was a lake, a huge lake. So
where is this at, the Uinta Basin?
The Uinta Basin is in northeastern Utah. On the Uinta Basin, Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch are located.
Okay.
So it encompasses all the way from Dinosaur National Monument, which is right at the Colorado-Utah border. Then as you move westward, you go into Vernal, and then you go into La Pointe, and above that is Blind Frog Ranch. Below that is Fort Duchesne, which is the Ute Reservation. Then directly next to Fort Duchesne is this reservoir, which is, we could discuss Bottle Hollow Reservoir for 2 hours. Below that is a huge mesa. At the end of that mesa on the south side is Skinwalker Ridge, and then you have Skinwalker Ranch below it.
Interesting. And so all those basins, you think, or like the tunnel system, what connected that being present to, you believe it was from a catastrophic like meteor impact?
Sure. So when you go to Meteor Crater, which is 3 hours north of here, when that impacted, it ripped open fissures underground. As a matter of fact, I took Phoenix MUFON in March up there, and we were underground for hours because that's how big the cavern systems are. It goes on forever. You just, as you get a little older, you put a little more weight on, and you can't fit through where I used to 10 years ago. So you can only go so far now. And that was created obviously by the impact. I mean, it ripped open fissures. So
and these were present prior to Meteor Crater.
I think Meteor Crater caused it. I think the impact that's right outside of Winslow that created Meteor Crater also created a lot of the tunnel systems from that huge impact, just breaking apart everything underground. So I think that occurred when there was this Eocene Uinta Lake, which was massive. It went all the way into West Colorado and covered a good portion of northeastern Utah. I think it impacted while the lake was there. So it ripped open all this. And then you got to take into account water, as this lake was there for about 13.5 million years, dripping and dripping. There's limestone underneath it. So you have all this water creating, as it drips down and the acids eat away, the carbon, there's this carbon acid and all that taking effect. It's opening all these cavern systems and tunnel systems. And what was there, if you're talking about a 13.5 million year period, and humans think, oh, we're it, we've been here 200,000 years. We've really kicked it into turbo, in the last 10,000 years. There's no way. That's just absolutely wrong when you think about just how long the Earth has been here, how long the solar system has been here. So what was using that, or what technology is down there, or, who was there mining already that was enslaving as indigenous people started showing up? Who was enslaving the indigenous people and using them for mining? And, Blind Frog Ranch, Mystery of Blind Frog Ranch, a good part of that is they're mining or looking for lost gold, bullion. So if that is a real thing, and it was from the Spaniards, well, here's an interesting little tidbit. When the Spaniards originally went up into Utah to start looking for gold and to start mining, the indigenous people told them, you know what? There's already mines in existence. There's already bullion available. And they started immediately bringing that back down into Mexico and then shipping tax portion off back to Spain. Well, not many people, or I don't think anybody really questions, why was it there before the Spaniards? Who was mining that? Yeah. So like I said, you start finding that maybe these cultures and civilizations currently melt into the paranormal because we just don't know that they're a part of the big picture yet.
Interesting. And so when you went up to Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch, it was originally because you were fascinated by the tunnel systems and like the fact that there was evidence of mining from before we ever thought it was possible to be mining there.
Well, it was all the petroglyphs and pictographs. And then I realized something's going on here because what's in these petroglyphs and pictographs, it's something that is in 9 Mile Canyon, which is about 80 miles away from Dinosaur National Monument. And then that's about 40 miles northwest. You have Dry Fork Canyon. So these indigenous people saw the same thing and were drawing the same thing. They're far away, but what do they have all in common? You look up and you all can see the same sky, or if some event is taking place. Now there's the Uinta Mountains that run between 9 Mile Canyon where Price is, and you have to go through that. But if it's occurring at such a large volume at some point in history, and it's so prevalent that that's what they're putting down for future people to know, for them to let their ancestors know about, well, where's that origin?
Yeah.
So that started me off. And then as I do more investigating and research, I start learning. So things that I thought I knew were what I thought, and I'm getting into that scientific part where I thought it was fact and it wasn't going to change, but it continues to evolve. So my theories as into certain things, why they're happening, has already altered or been changed from even last year as I do more research and we come across more data points. And I have future events coming up where I'm still in the process of creating that lecture for what we found. And what's kind of cool too is I'm going to be up there the last week of May, first week of June, and then go right from there to Laughlin, Nevada to present this at the UFO mega conference in Laughlin. So hopefully I'll have enough time to put everything together. And then obviously, there's certain things I have an NDA with that I can't discuss. But a great, fantastic thing is May 4th, season 2 of Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is starting. So there's going to be a lot more unfolding, being told to the public, which we never had any type of knowledge of it when Bigelow owned it before.
So he doesn't own it anymore?
No, Brandon Fugel purchased it in 2016.
Okay. Kind of what I have heard about Skinwalker Ranch, the limited things I have heard, it seems as though it's like they don't all fall under one realm. Like there's a bunch of different types of paranormal activity. And then I guess what George Knapp was saying on Joe Rogan was like, it's almost like you can't capture it on video. Like it almost knows that there's videos and it doesn't want to be captured. Does this reflect some of your experiences up there? And have you ever experienced unexplainable phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch?
So yes, with some technology like a magnetometer, ground penetrating radar, I've been able to capture certain data points, which will be presented
As like anomalies?
atypical. Exactly. They're atypical data points, magnetic. Most of them are, and I can't get too deep into that, but so I've captured
Due to NDAs or?
due to
Okay.
NDAs. So some of that's been captured, and that's going to come out from May 4th through the summer. So yes, for some reason it almost knows, and that's not always the case, but this is shown a lot, and it's happened to me, and I didn't believe it until it happened. But a lot of equipment fails for some reason.
Really?
So I have a magnetometer that it's really interesting. I have a fluxgate magnetometer, which is very high tech, and then I have this vector magnetometer, which isn't so high tech. It's a box, like this, and it has this switch on off, and you got to push it to go on or push it to off.
Yeah.
I mean, manually push it on off. It's not a computer that needs to be booted up like the fluxgate. It doesn't store data. Well, it does because I've had added on, but then I have to go and plug that into a computer to use. So this should never turn off unless the battery dies or I turn it off.
Got it.
Things like that. Or you have GPS that is locked on. I'm getting perfect coordinates. I go to a certain location and it's on, but it's not functioning.
Huh.
It's not picking up the satellites. It's just giving me zeros or just locked. You move away, you go somewhere else, it goes right back on, or you have meters that you just change the batteries. You put those good industrial batteries in that are supposed to last twice as long, and it dies.
Wow.
And the batteries are no good. So you have all these things, and until you experience it or at least see it as it's being filmed, it's hard to believe. And experience-wise, yes, I've had, but it's going to come out soon. I can't discuss it.
Does it fall under the realm of UFOs? I know your recent book that you brought today has a picture of Bigfoot on it, or like, is it like a skinwalker? Or I guess, are you able to kind of go into any of those details?
I guess it would be labeled as one of them. I can discuss one because I've already talked about it in prior talks. We were just south of Skinwalker Ranch on another property, and I was with security for that location. And they have a common border fence. It's the south fence of Skinwalker Ranch and the north fence of this property. And while we were out there for about 18 hours one day. It was in the summer. I think it was in June. It was the last day of May. And we were, collecting data. I was collecting soil samples, I think, at the time. And the security goes, "Do you smell that?" And I was like, "Yeah, it smells like something was killed or died." And he's like, "Kind of." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. It has a mix of a smell."
Yeah.
So as a police officer, I've smelt deceased people.
Okay.
So not in a weird way. I know what that smell is like. And he was right. It smelled like that, but it also had like this pungent odor, like rotting eggs.
Like sulfur.
Rotting eggs.
Like someone farted.
Yes.
Okay.
And a mix of like when a dirty dog gets wet.
Okay. Wet dog.
This
is like the deodorant from Monsters Inc. It's like, you want wet dog today. You want rotten eggs.
I guess I haven't seen that. But like a combination of those three. And it was like right up on us.
Huh.
And we were walking around looking to find a carcass of a deer or something that was there. And we looked for about 45 minutes and we couldn't find anything. And we moved away from that location, and about 10 minutes later, we could start smelling it again. I was like, what the hell, you know? And the wind, there was no wind that day. So,
it must have been like right next to you then.
Yeah, there was wind, but it was so minute that it couldn't have caused all that to come where we were. And so I was collecting the soil samples, and then I think I was running something else. And I lost track because I could smell it for so long. I just quit thinking about it because I was getting what I needed to do. And maybe another half hour went by, and I was like, that smell's gone. It's not around anymore. I was like, that's weird. If there was a dead carcass somewhere, it should continue to smell like that. So I was like, okay, now this is interesting. So we went around and we looked, and in that area of Skinwalker Ranch and this property, there is so much debris that it's piled about 8 or 9 feet, just dead branches, dead trees, just maybe 100 years, nothing has been moved. It's just built up over, it has to at least have been 100 years, just 8 or 9 feet. Couldn't locate anything, never thought about it again. Went home, did my thing. 6 weeks later, I get a phone call from this group that does cryptic investigations, Bigfoot. And they were on this property. They spent, I believe it was 2 nights there. And they had Native American trackers with them. And the guy starts, he's like, you know, Mr. Keenan, hey, I got to talk to you about this. And he's just rambling on. And I don't even know who it is yet. He's like, well, we were on this ranch, and they said that you were there, and we found these hairs, and then he's going on and on. I was like, well, hold on, you know, let me catch up. And then he goes, well, here's what I want to ask you. He's like, did you have this and this smell? And I was like, well, yeah. He goes, yeah, we spoke with the security. They were there with them as well. And I said, yeah, that's absolutely. He goes, well, that's what a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch smells like. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So apparently I smelt what a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch smells like.
How do they know what a Bigfoot smells like?
I don't know. I guess from so many observations, that's what they're stating it smells like. As far as I know, it hasn't been proven. So but that's what they were telling me, that's what I smelled. And I just thought it was interesting because, again, if something had died, that smell should have continued in that location. And I realized after a while that I had forgotten. I was like, wait a minute, it smells gone. But
yeah, interesting. So is that where your interest in Bigfoot started, was from that experience?
So I'm not, when I wrote the book, it's a trilogy. The first one was a UFO and an alien. The second is a shapeshifter scare. And the third is Bigfoot at Skinwalker Ranch. And what I'm attempting to do is I'm creating fiction for children in the ages of 10 to 14, where I wanted to introduce them to the topics that are in ufology, cryptozoology, and the paranormal. So I don't necessarily really have this huge desire to track or hunt down any cryptids. Yeah. And it's not really my thing. If it were to occur, absolutely. And I could, capture something, sure, why not? But what I wanted to do was present to kids in a standpoint of a story that also has a moral that goes along with it and all that, and terminology that is used, but just kind of pick the subject matter that's becoming of great interest to me, or is of interest to me, which is ufology, because I think that, like we said earlier, so much of this comes together. Yeah. Because we're just not aware of yet. Ufology
is one of those interesting conspiracies that seems to try to take the blame for everything. Oh yeah, who killed JFK is because he wanted to expose aliens. Like aliens are the backstory to everything. If you're like deep into the ufology, I guess I'm curious, like, what is the connection between ufology and Skinwalker Ranch and even Bigfoot? I've seen some people making that connection too.
Right. So the ranch was known as the UFO Ranch before it was Skinwalker Ranch. There was a school teacher that I think he was even doing it while he was a teacher out there. His last name was Hicks. For over 50 years, he documented incidents and just was amazing at going out and getting information from people and interviewing them. So for over this 50 plus period, there was this huge amount of information on UFOs, UAP, to the point where it became like a UFO alley. One of the highest scenes of seeing unidentified flying objects, and other events, orbs taking place, and then the Native Americans talking about the Navajo, the Unablushi that are supposedly there, that are also of this paranormal type events occurring.
What is that word? What did you say?
Skinwalker in Navajo is Unablushi. That's what they're really called.
Okay.
They're shapeshifters that practice dark witchcraft, which is Adishkash.
So is a skinwalker essentially a person who shapeshifts into a creature?
Yes. So they're capable of shapeshifting into anything. But that being said, their preference supposedly when you ask from the Navajo are several animals. They prefer the wolf, the coyote, bear, some type of bird, things of that nature. But apparently they can even supposedly shapeshift into half creature, half animal, half human at the same time. And this is what gets observed quite a bit here in Arizona on the Navajo Nation or other reservations. And because of the fact that the Ute defeated the Navajo in that area and pushed them out, they were supposedly cursed with the Skinwalker, that it was going to be there and forever with them. But that never made sense to me because the Skinwalker are pretty self-centered. They're doing it for themselves. And I could never understand why they would do this for the Navajo when they're pretty much against everybody. So currently I've built up different opinions as to what the Skinwalkers or shapeshifters are in the area, but I can't discuss that yet.
You can't discuss what your opinion is?
What they are. But it'll come out soon.
Okay, interesting. So when you talk to the Navajo and these Indian tribes, you said you've interviewed some of these tribes, right?
Yes. Well, from the tribe.
Okay.
People from the tribe.
When you talk to these people, obviously it's almost like we're on the outside and they're on the inside when we're talking about these things, right? Do they speak as if they have witnessed these things with their eyes, or is this kind of like folklore for them too, like Santa Claus?
Sure. So it's both. So you got to remember, for them, this isn't a big deal. This is just everyday life for them. The star people for them are just a part of their culture. To them, the folklore and the mythology is not folklore and mythology, it's history. And that's the issue that we have. We're like, well, how? That can't be it.
Yeah.
We can't wrap our head around that. But for them, it's just part of what's occurred always. And so it's been passed down to them historically. And a lot of them have witnessed or taken part or had something occur to them. So you're getting firsthand and you're getting historical data. From some people, it's both. From others, it's history. And then from another group, it's firsthand experience.
Interesting. I mean, it's like, what fascinates me is the fact that people like you and I who are not on the inside of some of these tribes, the people who I've met who are into paranormal things oftentimes have experienced something that they can't explain, which is fascinating because, like, when I meet you, like, you're a normal guy. When I meet, for example, one of my buddies who's been on the podcast before, his girlfriend has experienced the same type of entity as I have. And it's like, I can understand where you're coming from, as like sometimes you hesitate to almost talk about it because you don't want people to not take you as seriously. Like, even for me, like, this is a big step for me to have a podcast like this talking about paranormal stuff, because I have a business that, you know, fuels my entire life outside of this podcast. And that's completely separate from paranormal. And I wonder, like, oh crap, do I want to be talking about this stuff online and stuff too? But it's like, at the end of the day, when you look at the evidence, which is these people are from all different backgrounds, they're reporting the same types of things. Like when you say the petroglyphs, you see the same types of drawings in different parts of the world geographically. And it's like, there has to be something there. Why do you think it is that there's so much resistance for the mainstream, or just people who are so tapped into the mainstream to even entertain these ideas?
Sure. So I think there's a few things. I think one of them is science. You know, we're pushed from the media, from school, that science is fact and you can't stray from it. It's the way it is. And religion is wrong. You can't have two. But technically, I mean, science has become a religion. When you look at what makes up religion, it's the same things are now occurring in science. So that's one. So people are afraid to go against what they think they know. The second is like you and I, you know, discussing something like that. Am I going to have a job the next day? Or are you going to be made fun of? You know, you're not going to be taken seriously ever again. And for a scientist to even cross over a little bit into the paranormal is a career ender most of the time, you know, because to his buddies and to his peers, he's lost all credibility, that because he's gone against the paradigm they've created. And they're obviously afraid, and I understand for good reason. You know, if something so drastic were to change, they're going to lose their livelihood. You know, the grants are going to stop. They're not going to be able to teach what they were taught because it's not right. And then I think that the other thing is growing up as children. You know, we're allowed to have this active imagination and be able to do or talk whatever way we want. And then suddenly at some point, maybe around the age of 8 or 9, 10, we're suddenly starting to have our culture that we're in change us to adulthood. And with adulthood in this culture, we're not allowed to think outside the box. We're not allowed to think silly things that something could be a ghost or extraterrestrial, or that something could be inside the earth living when we're living on top of it. It just, it can't be.
Yeah.
So you have all these different things colliding and just making it more and more difficult. The good thing is recently this ball is starting to roll downhill and it's gaining momentum
In the mainstream.
Especially with, and I hate using the word disclosure because I don't even know what that is anymore. You know, I've heard disclosure 20 years ago, and then disclosure 10 years ago, and disclosure 4 years ago. And sometimes I think if there's disclosure for some people, they may not have a job.
I mean, what does disclosure even look like?
Yeah, exactly. You know? I don't know.
But I feel like we had disclosure recently, you know, like with, did you see the article where Jeremy Corbell, who has a documentary about Skinwalker Ranch, he released some footage that was confirmed on, what was it, like CNN or something, where they had these pyramid shaped UFOs that were captured by Navy cameras. Did you hear about that?
In the infrared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
This is what I mean. We're talking about is as it comes more into the media, and it's becoming more and more accepted that there's other possibilities, whatever that is. Who knows?
Yeah.
Again, it's unidentified for a reason. The military is now accepting the fact and letting the public know, okay, we've come across this too. We're kind of concerned. I have an article in my lectures that is from, I believe, 2009. It's almost towards the end of my lectures on Skinwalker Ranch, that states that there was a UFO tracked on the basin the media contacted NORAD, and NORAD said, yeah, we're aware of it. We don't know what it was. We're trying to get information so we can get it out to you. And then it just dropped. There was no more discussion about it. But I mean, back in 2009, you have NORAD being contacted and saying, yeah, we tracked it. We just have no clue yet. So there it was too in 2009. It just got forgotten.
Have you seen a UFO yourself?
I can't really discuss what I've seen in that regards.
Why is that?
Again, just due to the fact that things until maybe the end of the summer.
Got it. Do you feel, I guess for me, I guess part of what fascinates me about the UFOs is, let's say, okay, there are pyramid shaped UFOs flying over these Navy ships, or there are unidentified flying saucers, and maybe a flying saucer really did land in Roswell, right? But I've heard theories about the Nazis, specifically from Tom DeLonge, who's one of the bigger names that is helping getting these things released in the mainstream, which I would say to a lot of people probably adds credibility that maybe some of what he says might be true. Who knows to the extent, but one of his theories was like, he said he believes that Roswell was the Nazis. And then I go down the rabbit hole of like, well, how could that humanly be possible? And then you look into things like, okay, maybe the Nazis fled to Antarctica. And then you also have big populations of the Nazis in South America. And maybe they were doing things with the occult, and maybe they did have flying saucer technology. Do you believe that even if you saw a UFO, that's evidence that it's from another planet or solar system? Or is it possible that it's interdimensional or humans?
Sure. And again, it could be any of that. It could be interdimensional, which I think is a good possibility over it coming from, outside of the planet. Could it be from our own planet, just from somewhere we don't know exists? Is there an entrance that we're unaware of that goes into the center of the planet? This planet's huge on the inside, and we have no idea really what it is. Again, science tells us, oh, this is what it, but they really have no idea. They haven't been down inside. We've only gone, at the most, 12 miles drilled.
Yeah. And what is that? Like not even like
it's not even a scratch.
Yeah.
And the oceans, we've done more visitation outside of this planet than we've done, more exploring outside of this planet that we've done in our oceans. And 70% of the outer part of this planet is water, so there's many possibilities of where this could have come.
Yeah.
And then, so when you ask me if I've seen a UFO, I almost classify things differently between an orb, but I guess technically an orb is an unidentified flying object. So
have you seen orbs?
So here's what we're going to get into. So what I've seen up on the Uinta Basin, I've also seen in the Superstition Mountains.
And that's nearby, right?
That's very close to us. Where I live, it's only 20-minute drive.
Okay.
So it got me to thinking, are these objects light or are they solid objects? Is it a tangible item that could be touched?
Yeah.
And if I were to videotape something, nobody believes you anymore.
Yeah.
I could put anything on, and even I don't believe what I see because, it could be photoshopped or whatever. I'm terrible with software, but other people are amazing and they could create it or make it up. And so I am trying to think out of the box of a different way. Well, as a police officer, I used to use radar to catch people speeding. So I went out and I purchased a KA band police radar stalker gun and a LiDAR laser stalker gun, which I've had training in, been certified in, and understand that, that they operate, the KA band operates at a pretty high, I think it's like 32 to 38 band. I think it's in the gigahertz level. I think it's 32 to 38 gigahertz. And then LiDAR is almost instant because it's firing, light that's traveling so quickly that people with the radar detector can't even, it's done. If you're caught, you're caught. So I thought, what way to find out if it's light or if it's a solid object? Use radar. So I went out, this is recent too. This is within the last 6 months. Went out to the superstitions where I'd seen these orbs several times. And I've also seen orbs in Marfa when I lived in Texas.
Okay.
Went out there quite a few times, nothing. So it's not like I went out the first time and boom, it happened.
Yeah.
I went out there a lot and did other things too while I was out there. Not just this, but it was always there, ready to go if I had the opportunity. Well, much later, after going and spending a lot of time wasting gas, pretty much, because that was my main focus.
Yeah.
The rest was to keep myself occupied. I saw the orange orb, an orange orb that I'd been waiting to see. Good size, probably the size of a basketball.
To the viewpoint that
I was at.
So in the sky, it's like, oh, that's a basketball.
Right.
Okay.
And radar is going to tell me if it's a solid object, how far away it is.
Okay.
And this was part of my wanting to try this. So I grabbed the LiDAR gun first and turned it on. And sure enough, clocked the orb at 11 miles per hour. And it was at 400 plus feet. So suddenly I knew that's not just a light, it's a solid object.
So if it was a light orb or like electricity, it would not get picked up on radar.
Right.
Okay.
It had a surface that the laser impacted and then shot back at the gun.
Got it.
And I was picking up it moving at 11 miles per hour, casually.
Basically just hovering. Okay.
Real slow moving. Didn't care that I was scanning it with the
Was
LiDAR.
it just a solid color, or were there orbs inside of it at all?
It was orange. I didn't have my glasses, and my eyesight is getting worse and worse as I get older and older. It looked orange to me.
Okay.
Not like the sun or something like that.
So for a fact it was about 400 feet.
400 plus feet.
Okay.
And moving at 11, as fast as 11 miles per hour. At other times it dropped. So I put the LiDAR gun down and I grabbed the KA gun. What's fantastic about the Stalker is in order to catch people speeding, it leaks. So that's what people catch on their radar, and they know the police officer is there. The newer guns have what's called pop, which means it's completely off. You pop it and it comes on instantly and gives person less time to react and slow down. So what I did was I had it already set up, aimed at it, and I popped the orb. It started going crazy. It was dropping down and up. I clocked it as fast as 44 miles per hour, going down to, I don't remember, I have it written down how low it went to the deck, but it had gone up as high as about 600 feet, maybe just slightly over. And it did not like the fact that I was hitting it at this range, this frequency range of probably, like I said, in that 32 to 38 range, and gave me confirmation that at least this orb that I saw had physical form to it, shape to it. And
it was reacting
to me with a certain type of frequency.
That's fascinating. Immediately when I hear about, your experience with this orb, I can't help but think about one of my good friends who, I'll be honest, was not interested in the topic of UFOs. And it's like if I was hanging out with three people like this or whatever, and we're talking about it, he's just the guy who's like, yeah, whatever, And he ends up hearing about an orb sighting in California because he follows an influencer on like Instagram. And then he's in Scottsdale, in camp, like by Camelback Mountain in a big neighborhood, right? And he's telling these people like, oh yeah, there was apparently a UFO sighting in California. As he's talking about it, this is last March of 2020, right by Camelback Mountain. There's 8 or 9 people there, and he literally sees an orb pop up in the sky right above them, and all of them are looking at this orb. So they bring out their phones, their sky tracker apps, the star trackers, and they're realizing this is not a star because there should not be a star there. And he's filming it on his camera, and I screen recorded it on my phone because he put it on his Instagram story. And to me, I can see an orb, but inside it is a smaller orb, and they're concentric. And I don't know if they're spinning, but it looks like there's movement of the orb that's just hovering there. But then as he's staying there, just holding the camera still, the thing zips, and it shrinks down and then gets bigger and then shrinks down again. And then it changes to like a seashell shape. And I'm only seeing this in retrospect because it looks like the thing's just moving a little bit and it looks like camera shake, but I have it screen recorded and I'm going frame by frame. No, the thing shrinks, the thing pops up, the thing changes to a seashell, then it goes back to a sphere. And I'm like, whoa. And 9 people saw it. So what do you feel like this could have been a similar orb or a same type of craft, if you will?
You know, what's interesting too, is a lot of people have a theory on that. If we think of something to a point or a degree, are we the ones that are creating the paranormal event?
You just blew my mind. Tell me.
Well, yeah. So think about people aren't interested in something, and then something happens to a friend, or they see something that interests them, and then that same type of event occurs or happens to them. Skinwalker Ranch is very bizarre. It's hard to admit that something else around you knows what you're doing or thinking, but it makes you have to be open-minded to the fact that, are we possibly creating the events that we're seeing? And if so, does it require an energy source, whether it be natural, something under the basin, or man-made that we're just not aware of that's been there? Or is it the fact that, I mean, we're walking batteries that we don't understand really how we know how our physical bodies function to a degree, but you know, what gives us the ability to have thought and to understand and to capture memories, and to see things, you know, and what we see now, do we have the possibility of seeing in a broader spectrum once we start thinking about it? So are we creating it, or are we allowing ourselves the ability to gather more data when we open up some way? So that, I mean, that's interesting that, you know, your friend saw something, he's talking about it, and then suddenly it happens.
Yeah.
That it was manifested.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that then goes into the paranormal. Are certain things light? Are certain things have an actual physical body to them? And do we control one or the other? Neither. But I just thought that was interesting when you said that, because that's an ongoing theory that's catching on as to, are we creating our own paranormal?
Huh. That is a very interesting way to think about it. I think for me, when I love to play the devil's advocate, and I always try to, because I think that's the best way you can gain understanding scientifically, is like trying to disprove it in a way, right? And so one fascinating thing, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, but I'd be curious to get your opinion, and specifically because, like, I guess where does the whole portal event, is that an accurate term to describe things that you research? Like what describe portals to me? Like that whole concept seems foreign to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
So from what we're starting to gather or be privy to, and a portal, I don't know if it's interdimensional, and then we have to go into what is interdimensional, or is it a capability of a transference from one part of the planet to another or elsewhere? I don't know. or are there multiples? Or is it something where a space-time, there's a collapse and the past, present, and the future are all occupying the same space at one time? And I'll get to that in a second, but there has to be some type of energy available. And I say that because where I believe they happen the most, and I have to watch what I say here, there's obviously some type of energy that we're unaware of at that location. And this goes past Skinwalker Ranch.
And that comes from your ability to make magnetic readings and stuff, right?
Magnetic, electromagnetic, okay. Yes. Does gravity, people say, well, electromagnetism and gravity aren't supposed to interact, but maybe they do, and we're just not quite understanding exactly how. But some type of energy is gathering, which allows for these events to take place. And I call it an event because we really aren't sure what it is, where it goes. But now think about this. And have you read Hunt for the Skinwalker, the book?
No, I have not.
Okay, so think about if you've talked about Skinwalker Ranch or read it. They've seen this large wolf that
I've heard about
shot,
the wolf. Yeah, and
it didn't even phase it. It just kind of looked at them, and then they got closer and closer, and then they started phasing it more to where it knew it was interacting with that person shooting it, but it wasn't doing what we would expect it to do. Or suddenly we see this creature that kind of looks like a dinosaur, I guess, come out of nowhere. Or then we suddenly see this.
Have you personally seen the Skinwalker or a dinosaur?
No.
Okay.
These are what are listed in the Hunt for Skinwalker occurring, or what other people have stated they've seen. Or then in Hunt for the Skinwalker, they see this creature, dark creature, come out of a portal and walk away on the ranch.
And a portal, it looks literally just like a little spinning thing. That
No, this is
goes
on.
In. Okay.
It's on the ground. Well, just slightly above the ground, not like you would see it like in lengthwise, but more on the ground, just barely above it.
Does it emit any light?
So they said it emitted a specific color. And as a matter of fact, without infrared camera that they were using, it just was the light that one individual could see. The person with the infrared was able to see the entity come out. So it sounds like, when you think about it, that we have these creatures that might sound like something that existed in the past, and then one that maybe is in the future that we're not aware of, all of a sudden on the same spot, but only interacting to a certain degree. So what this sounds like to me is we have this collapse of space-time where the past, present, and the future have all come together in one location.
And that's what creates the portal.
That's what, well, the port, yes, exactly. That's what creates this portal. So if there's something next to it, doesn't realize, goes into it, or walks within this vicinity, it's suddenly not in its own spot, but it's in all three. Physically, it's mostly in its location, wherever it's occurring in the past, present, or the future. But now it's partly occurring in our present on the ranch.
It's like a fold in the space-time.
Fold in space-time. So if we were to see a dire wolf from 8,000 years ago that was in that area, suddenly in our present, and it sees these bovine in a corral, and it's curious because it's never seen bovine before, and it walks up to it casually and it sees humans, and it allows a human to touch it on the nose. Nothing, because it's still in its own and it doesn't know what the heck's going on. But then it suddenly smells, partly because it's part in our existence, and attacks the bovine. That individual pulls out its gun and shoots it. It's not completely in our existence. So it is aware that it's been shot, but it doesn't affect it.
Huh.
Now you get closer. So you're getting closer to its location, and you fire again and it feels it a little more, and you get a little closer and you fire again and it rips a piece of the flesh off of the direwolf. So now it's like, wait a minute, that shouldn't have happened to the creature. So it starts taking off. Now all of a sudden, whatever caused the space-time to fold on itself goes back. Let's say it's a magnetic force, and that magnetic force in either the past, present, or the future goes back to its normal value. And that portal starts dissipating. Everything starts going back here, and here. We see this dire wolf walking off, and then it's just gone. Where did it go? It was always there. It was just in a different time. But it existed in the same space for those brief moments that something, whether it's electromagnetic, gravitational, magnetic, or to a combination or a combination of all three, had a caused this to form and create this effect. So is this happening in certain parts of the world where people have witnessed it? And after thinking about it for a very long time, this makes so much sense that then you suddenly see this creature come out of this portal. Maybe it's from the future and we don't know what the heck it is because it exists in that spot just much later, but it happened to be in that location. What happens if maybe we are walking along on Skinwalker Ranch and the event occurs and it compresses, and we don't know that it's compressing right down because it's underground, this magnetic meteorite. Maybe there's a huge meteorite under that, and something is passing through it at this moment, causing this to occur. And it creates the fold or the collapse. Boom, and it comes down on you. And you're still walking on the ranch, but suddenly the ranch looks a little different. And you look around and suddenly you see this creature that's part whatever that looks like a dinosaur. And you're like, what the hell? You know, what's going on? And you think it's there on the ranch. But what if it's the fact that you've now crossed partway into the past at that location?
Yeah.
You know, that makes more sense.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So I've heard that example of that incident with the wolf. And they talk about that as if that's the Skinwalker, right? Was there actually a piece of it that got shot off?
They said a flesh was torn off of it.
Did they grab it to research?
I don't remember that part.
Okay. And then with the portal part, let's say hypothetically, okay, it's time space folding in on itself, right? And it creates this point in space time where the past, present, and future can exist all at once at one point in space. Would the wolf have to go back to that same exact point before it goes away to go back? Or is the wolf itself the thing that is in the different points in space?
See, and that's the point that I made when I said they see it trotting off and then it just disappears. Because how big of a spot does it affect, and how much of you are transferred or physically elsewhere at that time? Because technically you're still 100% in the same area. Just a part of what we don't understand has changed. So
so it could be like a big geographic.
Yeah, the space is the same, just time was altered. Or maybe it's the opposite. Something opposite has occurred. But yeah, when you try to think, you know, how is that even possible? And you're like, you think about it more, and it has to be that we know that that creature could easily existed in the past. We know what a dire wolf was. It was about that size. So, and then they see these things that look kind of sort of like a dinosaur or something. Well, I mean, they existed.
Do we know much about the demeanor of a dire wolf? Is it something that would normally be friendly to a weird thing?
Well, see, and that's the point, because the way it reacted was initially it walked up to the bovine, didn't attack it because it didn't know what the hell it was. It doesn't have bovine in its time. Same with humans.
Wasn't it walking on 2 feet as well?
Well, I think that was a different. No, this one was on all fours. They thought it was just a very large wolf when they approached it.
Okay.
And were allowed to touch it because it was still trying to figure out what it, what they were, what the hell's going on. A minute ago I was chasing some other, lunch, and now suddenly this is right here in front of me, walking up to me.
Have there been experiences from people on Skinwalker Ranch researching and feeling like they were not in their current time?
I don't know so nothing that I know, but I don't know if we would even know that, because think about it. If it suddenly collapsed on us and we were in a different time, we would still think that we're in our same location. How much of our surroundings would change. So when suddenly an individual sees what looks like an RV out in the middle of the fields of Skinwalker Ranch with this 7.5 foot tall, all clad in dark, humanoid looking person in there, in what looks to be an RV, and then suddenly sees her and is staring at her. And then she's, what's going on? Did she cross elsewhere? Did they cross together? Because he wasn't fully aware of her.
Wait, so this was a real, is this a real
is
example?
in Hunt. Yeah, this is in Hunt for the Skinwalker.
So what was this? The RV and the dark figure inside?
Yes. So the owner's wife stated that she saw.
This was before a bunch of researchers came over.
Yes, this was in 1994 or 95.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is what got NIDS involved, was all these strange occurrences. But when you think about it, she suddenly becomes aware at some point that, what the hell is this RV doing in the middle of our field? And then at some point, this tall creature that maybe it looks like it could be from the future, or maybe it's from the past, like I said, lost civilization, suddenly sees her home and her, and they're both kind of confused. So,
and did the dark thing in the RV did the RV look relevant to the time period? Do you know that?
So she describes it as an RV because that's the only thing she can describe it as. Again, like in the past, if they saw things flying around and it looked like a cross, what would you carve into the stone? A cross, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it was a cross.
Could have been an airplane.
Could have been an airplane. They just don't know it. Could an airplane from our present have suddenly crossed without even knowing, because it's not suddenly going to stay in the past. Yeah. Because 3 past, present, future come together and then come back apart. Yeah. So what are they seeing? But think about it. We're seeing all this strange activity thousands of years ago from the Barrier Canyon style culture. And they're not putting what they should be putting, like having barbecues and your family. And then what's also interesting is when they sometimes do drawings of animals, it looks like things are coming down at the animals and the animals are scattering or running away from it. So that's another interesting thing. But I mean, we could talk for hours about what the petroglyphs show.
I guess one thing that I'm starting to realize is, I guess if you're talking about a portal event, that doesn't always necessarily mean interdimensional. It just could mean a collapse of space-time, right?
We don't know exactly what it is. And then there could be, like I said, different types of portals or events occurring. There could be ones where it's extraterrestrial. It could be space-time. It could be interdimensional, because I don't know anybody that has gone into other dimensions that I can go and, that can legitimately prove, it's all personal experiences, and you can gather just so much personal experience and stories. And as the person taking that, you're like, man, this is so similar here and similar there. They don't know who they are, but you find the similarities. But again, that's what it is. It's their firsthand experiences. And until we're able to have like the film crew there and capture something that just changes the way everybody's thinking. Same thing, disclosure. I don't even know what that is, because how much proof does a person need until the spaceship pulls up above us and beams down and, says, hey, we're
We're
you know,
from
your
planet-
relatives from Mars.
Yeah.
You know, here we are. You know, until that happens, nobody, they're not, and it's still people probably won't believe it.
Yeah, because it's
They'll
a
think
video.
they'll think it's being staged. You know, the media is, this is a prank.
Yeah.
You know,
One thing, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could talk about, and I'm curious to ask you about. But one event that happened to me that I was, you know, kind of got us on this tangent to begin with. That going back to, I want to play the devil's advocate, but this one I really struggled to wrap my head around, and the only explanation I've currently come up with is it has to be interdimensional. And here's what kind of happened to me is like, I hadn't thought about this probably for years because it was something that happened to me in high school, and it was kind of one of those things that I was too embarrassed to tell anybody, and I didn't tell anybody, but it was a recurring event for me. And even as I grew up, I maybe in my memory had repressed it because I would try to find a logical explanation or something. And I almost to this day still wonder like, did that really happen? Like, or is it my memory playing tricks on me? But I was kind of going looking for a movie to watch on Amazon Prime, and this picture stands out immediately to me. And it's a documentary called The Hat Man, or something about the Hat Man. Have you heard about the Hat Man?
yes.
Okay, very interesting.
My first book is called Dark Shadows and Catastrophe for a reason.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to tell you my experience with the Hat Man. I moved to a house at the Lake of the Ozarks with my parents. And I'm getting goosebumps talking about this, right? When I saw the documentary, it gave me goosebumps, and I turned it on. And in the first 5 minutes, I had to turn it off because it was so true to what I experienced, to where someone who hadn't experienced it probably sees this and goes, this is bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But when I was, all right, so I moved to this house of Lake of the Ozarks, and this house, you know, cause it's like very like woody area, right? There's a lot of trees, and our house was built on like a steep hill, and it goes down to the dock by the water, meaning that my bedroom, which even though it's in the basement, is like 20 feet off the ground, you know? And so when we went there to visit at first, my family loved the house so much. It was like, oh my God, this is a perfect house. So we got this stock. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't this how horror movies start? Like everybody's so happy. And then we move in and shit goes crazy, right? And so in my head, I started to become a little bit skeptical. And so we go back up to the house, and we're in the basement. Everybody and I got 2 step siblings, and we're picking out the bedrooms of where we'd stay. And I've had paranormal experiences, or just experiences I can't explain from when I was a child, to where I know that I can walk into a room, and if I feel a weight or a heaviness, or like I can feel a bad type of energy, and I don't want to be in that room. And it's weird because like the moment you leave the room is the moment like you feel the sense of relief. And you almost said the same thing about with your experience with like the faces in the wood. Like you walk in and it feels heavy. I got that feeling in this house, but only when I went into the bedroom at the end of the hallway in the basement. And I said, hey, if we move here, just don't make me stay in that bedroom at the end of the hallway. I feel safe in this bedroom. I want this bedroom. Well, sure enough, we move in several months later. The stepmother tells me I can't have this bedroom. You get that bedroom. The one bedroom I didn't want. And so the first night we're staying there, I turn off the TV. There's a TV in there. Turn it off, and I see what looks to be like a figure just standing there in the window. But this window has just, you can see this trees back, but it's 20 feet off the ground, you know, and it looks like it's just standing there with a top hat. And I don't really think much of it there. And this is like probably over the course of like months that this has happened, or a couple weeks. And sometimes I'll have experiences during the day where I'm on the other level, the level above, and I'll be like just turning or something. And in the corner of my eye, I see the window, a hatted figure just walks across the window. That also happens to be like 15 feet off the ground. And I'm like, wait, did I really see that? But then I confirm it at night when the TV's on, there's lights in the room. I don't see anything. Turn off the light, and I see the figure just standing there in the window, the silhouette. And I don't know what to make of it, but I feel scared. But at the same time, it's not moving. And that was kind of the conclusion. It's not moving. It's just standing there. So if I just sleep with the TV on, whatever. So I did this for years, probably from 15 to 18. every night I went to bed, if I turned off the light, I could see the silhouette. And I would always feel a negative energy in that room. I didn't like being in that room, period, but I would go to sleep in there. And honestly, looking back on that experience, the first time I ever had sleep paralysis was in that basement. And I would see like shadows in the stairway or something like that. I don't know if that's related to this, but I always had the vibe that if I tried to tell someone about this and tried to show it to them, it wouldn't show itself. I got that feeling, if you will. Well, anyways, for about 3 years of constantly verifying. And when I talk about verifying, I mean, I would go outside in the middle of the day and I would study the trees to see if there's any way it could cast a shadow that looks somewhat like that. And it wasn't common that I would see it crossing in the middle of the day, like out of the corner of my eye, but it was common enough to where it lined up with me seeing this thing every freaking night. And so when I was a senior in high school, I decided to test this theory and I tried to tell my friend, and I went there middle of the day. The shadows were dark enough from the trees where in the middle of the day, I could still see it when I turn off the light. So I turn off the light, I verify that it's there. And I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to test if I can show it to someone else. And so I tell my friend, I was like, hey, Bobby, so this is going to sound crazy, but I want to tell you something. I told him the story. I was like, so I want to show it to you. I want to try, but I have a feeling that it might not be there when I try to show it to you. So he's like, all right. So we go back up, and 5 minutes prior, I had confirmed that it was still there. Now I try to show it to him. It's not there. And I haven't seen it since until I saw the Hat Man documentary. Well, here's another thing that kind of ties into this. Recently, one of my friends who moved here from Seattle, he and his girlfriend, they moved here together. And we were hanging out one day as like my girlfriend and us four as like a double date type of thing. And I was bringing up paranormal stuff. I was like, have you guys ever experienced anything you can't explain? Right. And she says, oh yeah, I've seen a ghost. I've seen an apparition, which is a separate thing when I was 7, full body apparition, but I've also seen the Hat Man, which is probably more like my teenage years. Right. And I didn't even know it was called the Hat Man until I saw the documentary. And she's like, yeah, it like had this top hat and I would see like this shadow. I didn't really think anything of it because she called it a ghost. She called it an apparition. She didn't call it a shadow. And I randomly decided to DM her like a couple months ago. I was like, hey, is this a picture? Because that's the thing is like when you see the picture of the Hat Man on Google Images, you know what which one is the real one because it looks verbatim, the exact outline shape as what I saw, to the detail. And I sent her the one that I saw that verbatim looks exactly like what I saw. And her response says everything. Oh my God, that's exactly what I saw. That's exactly the top hat. And what's crazy is she just saw it. Her mom had seen it and her mom had gotten sexually assaulted by this thing, which I'm like, whoa. And in my opinion, if I'm thinking what you were saying earlier, like, maybe we manifest our own paranormal. I could see maybe like, oh, that had to have been like a crazy ghost or whatever. But the Hat Man is something I can't explain. And the only explanation that logically makes sense to me is this has to be an interdimensional being. And maybe the hat trench coat is like the tool that allows them to access this dimension. Well, what's your take on that? What's your experience with the Hat Man?
Well, none with the Hat Man.
Okay.
But, similar experience. That's why listening to you, I'm a little, but I could understand something like that it would require maybe some type of technology for it to occur. And so many people have seen the similarity, and you got to think, you know, if you haven't had it happen to you, what the hell is it doing with the hat on?
Yeah.
You know, why, what were you drinking or smoking, you know, to see a ghost with a hat or a shadow with the hat. And so, yeah, absolutely. And remember, when we're talking about paranormal, there's got to be multiple different things that occur or take place. The universe has been around for too long, and we're here for just not even a blink of an eye when you think about it. So we're absolutely not aware of everything or everyone or every place. But I mean that's excellent thought in regards to it being some type of technology to be able to cross over or bend whatever or step through, whatever way it takes place. I had a similar, and I think it's just due to the fact that I had a near-death experience, that I was more open to it. It started when I was 4 years old, and we had moved into a house in La Habra, California. There was the moment we walked into this house, my parents loved this house. It was on a hillside. The whole area used to be Native American lands, that there were many different bands of Native Americans that lived in the area. And I mean, as a 4-year-old, that I had, that doesn't come into thought and all that. And pretty perceptive at the age of 4, and very good memory. And like I said, it's just due to the fact of what happened to me. I remember so much of everything in life. But at the age of 4, I started having paralysis, and I had a shadow figure in my room. And it was never a full body. It was always missing the feet. And years ago, when I lived in California, I started writing a book, and it was going to be nonfiction about my experience, and I had named it The Evil Pan. I ended up getting divorced and all that, and in all the process of moving, I lost the 4 chapters that I had written, and I was so upset that I didn't write again until 2016, and then I decided to write it fictionally. But this entity was just it wasn't pitch black. It was to where I could tell it had a face, but I couldn't make out its exact facial features. You could almost see when it smirked, its change in if it was angry or if it got excited. But it was a constant every night, as it would keep me from being able to move, and just all kinds of things. And it became physical. I mean, to the point where I was thrown up against the wall. It was about 4.5 feet tall. It looked like a shadow figure of a pan. It had like a hunter's cap on instead of a long hat. And I've discussed this before. It's in my first book. Just obviously, the character in the book is named Patrick because it's my middle name.
Okay.
And I was horrified to go to sleep. There were days when I hadn't slept for a long time. You would tell your parents, and they would, I would scream. They'd force me to go to sleep. They'd have to sleep with me till I fell asleep. And it just kept going on for the whole time we were in this house. At some point, my sister was born, and they put her in that room and moved me down to the end of the hall. And I was horrified for my sister, but it still came over to where I was at. And it would always form in the closet. And it always looked like this dark mist would form before. And it would come out of what later on I realized was what I consider a portal. And always dressed the same. It had that damn hunter's cap on. And this one night, I see the entity come out at me. It looks at me, and then it shoots down the hall into my parents' room. And a few seconds later, I start hearing screaming and everything. This thing finally went to my parents' bed and was shaking my father on the bed. My mom had got off, and she was watching as my father was physically being tossed up and down on the bed by what they saw looked like this big shadowy bear, just a figure of like a bear. It wasn't a bear, but it had the size and the kind of formation of something like that, but it didn't take full shape. That was the same thing that I saw exit the room as my shadow figure with the hunter's cap on. And then it attacked my father. After that, they believed me, And
had you told them about it before?
Oh, every night. I was horrified to go to bed. I would do absolutely anything I possibly could. They're like, you need to quit watching TV. You're not allowed to watch this. You're not allowed to watch that. And, you know, you could tell, like you said, you could tell them until you're blue in the face and they don't believe you until it finally happened to them.
Yeah.
And soon after we moved, and I actually had that figure. We moved here to Paradise Valley in 1979. One more time with that, and it interacted with my sister and I while we were playing in the middle of the afternoon one day. One more time when I was 15 years old. And I think at that time when I was 15, we lived in El Paso, Texas.
So this is a different house.
These are different houses.
So it's like it followed. Do you think it followed you?
I think it followed me. But that final time when I was 15, I think I was getting to the point where I was just so angry and so frustrated with allowing it to just cause to the point where I couldn't move, you know, and it could just do whatever, that I consider what I fought back, you know, just kind of was like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm not going to allow it. And after that day, I've never had interaction with it in that form. So, I mean, I've had other strange things happen, and I don't think that was what was involved. But yeah, in regards to that, I always thought it was freaking weird that it had the same damn hat on all the time, and it was a hunter's cap, and it always reminded me of an evil Pan.
What do you mean Pan?
Like a Peter Pan. Like
got it.
It looked like just this.
Did you hear the legend behind what Peter Pan is supposed to represent?
No.
Apparently, and this is what my girlfriend told me, she said that Peter Pan, the truth behind that story is supposed to represent, Peter is like representative of death. And what he does is when he comes and takes all the children and they fly away with him, but all the children really just die in their sleep.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. Yeah.
That is an interesting connection almost. But when you say the hunter's cap, it ironically reminds me of the time I saw a full body apparition. And I think almost for content purposes, I would like to go back to this place and do a paranormal investigation if I would be able to. But I'd be curious to know the history of this, and I'll just kind of give you the cliff notes. But basically, when I was 7, I had a lot of paranormal experiences when I was a kid. I'll be honest. I don't know why, but it's like when I was in first grade, I was like, what are you, like 6 years old in first grade? Well, we had a bunch of children's books in this Christian school I went to, and it was an old building, but like, you know, every classroom has like a bunch of children's books. For some reason, I'm a 6-year-old kid, and I pick out a book out of all the children's books, and it happens to be a book about paranormal investigating and like ghosts. Why is that in a first grade classroom to begin with?
Right.
And so I'm reading this thing, and it's scaring me. I'm reading stories about like seeing like someone sitting in your back seat, and as you're looking in the rear view mirror, and then you look back and there's nobody there. There was a chapter in this book where it talked about like, hey, if you are if you're walking down the street at night and you see a ghost on the other side of the street, or walking on the street, cross to the other side, but also for protection, keep a piece of bread crust in your left pocket. Like weird things like that I remember. And I don't know, maybe that was like the catalyst to me seeing stuff, because when I was 7, around 7, one, I still can't explain this one. I was at church. I was playing Joseph in a nativity scene. We were outside. They built a little steeple out of like wood like this. And I'm sitting in the back corner like of this steeple. The entire congregation is in front of me, and everybody has glow sticks because it's at night. I've never seen a glow stick before, so I'm a kid. And so I see this little kid who's playing one of the wise men. He's chewing on the glow stick. And I'm like, oh, I want to chew on a glow stick. It looks like something I want to chew on, like it's green and it's glowy or whatever. I stick the glow stick in my mouth. The moment it touches my mouth, I hear a voice. Keep in mind, I'm in the back corner and everybody's in front of me. Whisper right behind my neck, and it says, "There's poison in that."
Wow.
And I'm like, and so I tell my dad after the congregation, and I tell the pastor. I go up to the pastor. I was like, "Hey, is there poison in this?" He goes, "Yeah, don't put that in your mouth." And I'm like, "Well, here's what happened to me." and here's how I know there's poison in it. And my dad walks up and he goes, his name is Jim. He goes, your son says he heard the voice of God outside. And I was like, bro, like, that's not what happened. Like, it wasn't God. There was something that told me there was poison in this because I put it in my mouth. So that was the first thing. Around the same age, I'm staying at this daycare. This is Leavenworth, Kansas. So all the buildings in Leavenworth are really old. And there's this big mansion that's still a child's daycare to this day. But because it was such an old house, like the folklore as a kid who would go there, everybody would talk about how back in the day, this used to be a hotel before it was a daycare. And in the hotel, apparently 9 people were murdered one night. And they always talk about like, yeah, there was a guy who was here hunting and apparently he was chopped up with an axe and his body parts were thrown out back. And who knows if this is all even true, because I don't know how to verify it. And I've tried to do Google searches and I can't find anything. But they would do Friday night lock-ins once a month, where on Friday night they would let the counselors or the women who worked there as like the daycare people stay, and then all the kids would stay, and it would be a lock-in. And then throughout the night they'd have different activities and stuff. This is my first ever one of the lock-ins, and I'm like 7, and they did this thing called a ghost hunt, where the counselors would dress up like ghosts, put sheets over their head, and they would hide upstairs. And then the kids would go around with flashlights looking for everybody. Right. Well, on this night, they were prepping for the ghost hunt, and we were watching an episode of Goosebumps on one of those old TVs that came out, rolled out on the tray. And it was a big box TV and it had a strap over the top. You kind of know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And a VCR, and there's an episode of Goosebumps playing. Well, anyways, it's storming outside. And I remember it storming because lightning strikes. It's so loud. And right when lightning strikes, and it must have hit strike really, really close, because right when it strikes, the episode goes to the white noise, right? And then the main lady comes up. She's trying to fix the VCR. And I vividly remember she's like pulling tape out of the VCR. Like, it is screwed. We are not finishing this video. And she's out of frustration. She goes, all right, everybody just go upstairs and start the ghost hunt, right? And I'm like too afraid to go upstairs because I'm 7 and this is my first time there. And all the kids there, they're like, you know, a lot of them are older than me. They're like 10, 11, 12. So they run upstairs. They're all excited. All the counselors are upstairs. I'm the last kid who's downstairs. And the only other person who's downstairs with me is Miss Joan, who was vigorously pulling tape out of this fucking VCR tape or whatever, VHS tape. And the way it's lined up, it's kind of similar to what your original story with the wood. There's a stairwell that goes up, and then there's a little landing, and then it turns and goes up again to the second floor. And right at the bottom of the stairwell is the doorway, and it's like a double door that swings open, like kind of like this. And I'm standing in the doorway. I can look in here, and it's like the main room where the TV is. And if I look this way, it's the stairwell going up. Well, I'm the last kid there, and there's Miss Joan in here. So I'm looking at Miss Joan, and I'm about to go upstairs where everybody else is. And on that little landing between the flights, I see a full body apparition, which is somewhat translucent, but it's white. And it's a person wearing a hunter's cap. And it's what I assumed was the hunter that got chopped up and thrown behind the building, right? And when I think hunter's cap, it was almost like a raccoon cap, like a Davy Crockett type of hat that David Crockett would wear. And I look, and he turns, like if I'm looking up and then it turns and goes up, he turns, squares up fully to me, makes eye contact with me, and just stands there and stares at me, standing at the top of the stairs. And so because of the way the layout, I don't have to move to talk to Miss Jones. So I'm like right here, and I'm making eye contact with it. And I lean, I go, Miss Joan, there's a ghost upstairs. And she's like, no, duh, there's a ghost hunt going on. And so she goes, whatever, just go upstairs. And I look back and it's gone. So that was like around the same time as like I heard the voice, but then I didn't have another paranormal experience until the Hat Man when I was in high school. But yeah, that's kind of what I thought about when you said like hunter's cap or like something like that.
Sure. And I always think that maybe there's a possibility that there's certain types of people that for some way, shape, or form have some type of greater openness to events occurring like that. And maybe some type of event that you had allowed that to open, or you built upon that, strengthened it. Same thing. I feel like it had something to do with the near-death experience that I had that was the cause for so much.
Honestly, I don't even know what that would be, but I could see, because I've definitely heard about like people having near-death experiences and being more open to that stuff. I don't know if maybe I'm just naturally more open to it. Maybe I was just more open to it as a kid. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but I don't know. I guess, do you feel like, I guess for me, I get confused. I confuse myself because I'm constantly thinking, well, is it a ghost? Is it interdimensional? Is it aliens? If it's aliens and if it's interdimensional, do ghosts really even exist? Like, and I'm like, but I've experienced different things that I can't explain that I would definitely consider ghosts. And I would definitely at this point consider interdimensional, but I have no idea. And now I'm really thrown in a whirlwind when I think about like faces and wood. You know what I'm saying? Which makes me think like maybe this is all just a video game simulation, you know?
Possible. I guess anything's possible. I think that maybe when you're talking interdimensional and ghosts, there may not be a difference, and we aren't aware of that yet. That maybe everything is interdimensional, and the way when we see things or other unknown occurrences or things that we can't explain happen, maybe it's happening in that place, or that place is coming to us for that moment in time. And like I said, I'm a big believer in this crossover, or things coming together at certain times or points. And maybe due to the fact, maybe there's some people that remained open since they were children, you know, because our whole society is set up to change the way we think, and maybe we block it somehow without knowing it. Maybe it's all the crap that we eat and the things we do to ourselves and occur to us living day to day, that we lose certain abilities that we initially had when we were younger.
Do you think we lose it, or maybe it's like a muscle? Like you think you can regain it by working it?
I guess it's possible. I wouldn't know how to, I wouldn't have the correct answer for you.
Yeah. You know, I guess this is kind of a change of topic a little bit, but I'm curious to hear what you think about a archaeological location in South America. I think it's Pumapunku with the big H blocks.
Right.
Have you visited there?
I haven't been there myself, but
what do you make of that?
Yeah, that was an ancient culture or civilization, or both, that we've just lost historical data about. Not everything has to be extraterrestrial. I'm a big believer that it was from here. We just, don't remember them, don't have the data, and hopefully maybe at some point there is some type of archive available that we'll come across. And it has to be. It's just that the geography has changed so much, and like people. Great example. People say that the Colorado River created the Grand Canyon over millions of years, and I'm leaning more towards the fact that a huge lake or something broke, and in a matter of no time at all created it by, all this water come flooding down at one time, and then it being there and just constantly breaking through. But same thing, a lot of people say in that portion of Peru that even though that's so high up, at some part it was below the Pacific Ocean water, and that within a matter of seconds or minutes, it was pushed upward. And then again, it was pushed down for another catastrophic event and then back up. And if that happened, look at everything.
What could cause something like that?
A major catastrophe.
Like a meteor hitting the...
Well, and I always have this feeling that the Earth acts a lot like our sun, that it's just a small sun technically. And I personally believe that over the course of time that the inner core leaks to the outer core and causes almost like a nuclear type detonation or explosion. And for a certain amount of time, maybe 12 hours a day, we lose that rotation. But if we were to lose that rotation, it doesn't stop the wind from traveling at 1,000+ miles per hour. So imagine the destruction. Imagine causing the actual poles to flip, not magnetically, but I'm talking physical poles to flip and be in different location. And that amount of weight and pressure would just yank and pull everything down with it. Where would it pull it to, And then the waters would come flying over it at 1,000+ miles per hour. You would have earthquakes. You would have active volcanoes suddenly all come to life. You would have tsunamis that would reach almost everywhere. So I don't think necessarily that the event had to be an asteroid or a meteor. I think it had something to do with the planet itself, some type of change that occurs every so often. And at that point, I think that the only people that survive are who are below ground. And I always tell people, if Adam survived, he was probably like the custodian of the school or something. He wasn't, this incredible scientist. So all that technology and everything was lost, and it took thousands of years to build it again.
Do you think that there's a possibility that there was probably a more advanced human civilization that was wiped out way longer ago than we can even conceive, like hundreds of thousands of years ago?
Yes.
Interesting. And is that just from examples like Puma Punku or what's some of the other major ones? Göbekli Tepe. Yeah, well, look at that. I mean, it almost seems like they were trying to measure or monitor something in the skies, and it kept moving or changing for some reason. So they would have to create another one next to it to continue monitoring. And we were moving erratically so much to the point where they had to keep building these structures to keep up with it. And at some point they buried them because whatever they were monitoring, suddenly they knew, it's coming. Yeah.
So let's save this for whoever's going to survive, if anyone is going to survive. And think about it. If something like that were to occur, I mean, it would wipe out almost everybody. There would be so few people, and the earth would take hundreds, maybe thousands of years for it to get back to normalcy. So you would have people living underground for a very long time. And now we have all this folklore and mythology about us being in hell or in Hades, and at some point coming up into the new world, and starting over again. The Native Americans, some are in the fourth, some are in the fifth world. One was destroyed by fire, another by water, so if you look at the way that the stories are structured and you're like, you know what, maybe this isn't trying to tell some type of story. Maybe this crap actually happened exactly the way it's being told. It's food for thought.
Yeah. One thing that I realized recently is, like, if there had hypothetically been super advanced civilizations like Atlanteans or something like that had such technology where they could build these big structures back in the day, way before we could even conceive it being built, wouldn't they have satellites or something in orbit like we do if they were hypothetically more advanced than we currently are? And if so, where are those ancient satellites rotating around the Earth?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that?
Sure. And why are they not still out there and we're just not told about it? Or what if they're, some people say there's these huge glass structures on the moon that we're not being told about.
Really?
So think about moon glass would be stronger than any metal that we know of right now. So maybe it is out there and we're just not told about it. Or it happened so long ago. What would happen to our satellites over 1 million years? They would leave orbit or lose the gravity of the Earth would pull them in, and what would they do? They would crash or be burned up in the atmosphere. So why aren't these? Yeah, I agree. Absolutely, they had to have had stuff, and it's out there. We just haven't found it. Or the possibility of it.
Yeah.
That potential is absolute.
Yeah. One thing, and I guess, I'm curious, is like, I've found that the deeper I go into the rabbit hole and the more I contemplate the possibilities of what things could possibly be, I feel like I start to become almost like, I don't know how to describe it. Like you almost lose motivation for the day-to-day stuff because you're like, well, what does it matter in the grand scheme of things, Have you ever suffered with anything like that?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day. I realize that you can't look at everything, and no matter how hard you try to take it all in, I've had to narrow it down, and I want to be able to provide physical data that can at least show that some things are taking place. Maybe this is the reason for them. So in the last few years, I've gotten or used more technology just due to the fact that when I watch television and I start seeing all these paranormal shows, it always seems it's the same thing, and nobody's able to capture that proof that, damn it, this is it. This is for real. And now it's gotten to a point where it's just part of this culture where everybody's running around, with devices that they don't really know what they're collecting, and what are they going to do with that information once they have it? And it doesn't seem like anything's being done. So I could tell you all my personal stories, and I can collect so many firsthand stories from other people. But like I'd said earlier, in the end, it's just stories unless we have proof behind it. And for me, I absolutely am always willing and open to look at both sides, go down both roads. A lot of people have trouble with me in that regards, but if I'm not willing to look past what we know today, how are we ever going to move forward and see if there is something other than what we currently are aware of? And a whole part of that is just trying to find the right technology to collect that data. And for some of this, I don't even think it's been invented yet. So we're limited right now with the knowledge that we know based upon what we know now. And maybe all that paranormal just doesn't operate in that realm. And all these people that always tell you, oh, I sense this and feel that, maybe they really do. They're on to something. And we need to start asking ourselves, how can we collect the data that is being represented in their mind? And how can we turn that into being able to not just collect data, but how about now interact with the anomaly or the atypical behavior occurring? I would love to create a portal. I would love to be able to change the frequency, the resonance, the vibration that I think is required all at once. I have tons of ideas of how to do it, but I don't have the technology to attempt it. And I don't even know if that technology would be able to interact with what I'm hoping for. But at some point we have to start in order to get there.
Do you think, because I always hear, speaking of like technology, you always hear the stories of like, maybe some guy has a scientific invention or a breakthrough, like the guy who apparently had an engine that ran on water rather than gasoline, and then he gets mysteriously murked by potentially the government. Do you think that there is a cabal or a person on top somewhere, some person somewhere who knows and has access to that type of stuff.
I do. Remember that OSAP and ATIP took place on Skinwalker Ranch. That money was allotted to Bigelow for whatever was happening there. And this is, like you said, I have all this, so I'm constantly thinking about it, and I hate having to do anything else but think about this. So Bigelow sold the property. Why would he do that? Unless he and the government got what they needed or interacted with whatever it was or whatever it is. Why would they sell it? Why would he get rid of it? It had to be that they found their answers.
You don't think he just got tired and gave up?
No, absolutely not. No way. But here's what worries me is, what if this cabal or these people are protecting us for our own good? What if a lot of bad things happen to good people? It hasn't been always positive or neutral. There's been some very negative things take place that have hurt people, injured people on the ranch. What if we're talking about person, place, or thing that's not good, or many person, places, or things, and they're trying to stick fingers into a dam to prevent it from leaking out or breaking and bursting and coming in. So we always want to know, and we think the government is hiding stuff. Well, maybe they are, but for a good reason. And that's even scarier to me, because I still want to know, but at that point, if that knowledge is made known to the public, how is our perception of the way we live life going to change, especially with religion? I'm always worried for the fact that what if we're dealing with, there are a bunch of micro black holes that can come together for some reason, for whatever is underground. Imagine what we're dealing with if we have all these micro black holes suddenly being able to form inside the planet. What we're talking about, how do we even defend against something like that? Or maybe now that they were done gathering the research or finding the technology that they found and being able to reverse engineer it or something, he got rid of it because they were done with the property. And it was acting up more in the past. In the late 1990s, it was really active for some reason, and it has died down a lot. In the last year or two, it's been picking up again. So why is that happening? And I just have this feeling that there's a lot of negative. I don't necessarily think it's entities, negative energy, maybe a grouping of it all, but maybe there's things that we shouldn't be dealing with that are taking place. And when we find out from the cabal, maybe it was for our own good. Even good or bad, though, I still want to know. And I think as humans, we're all suckers that way.
Yeah. Last question before we kind of wrap this up, because I don't want to take too much of your time, is what do you make of Mandela effects?
So describe to me what you...
The Mandela effect that really gets me is the Mandela itself. When I was in high school, I could have sworn I read in a history book that Mandela died in prison in the 90s. Around 2012, he dies, and we're like, my first thought was, wait, didn't he already die like decades ago?
Like a glitch in the Matrix?
Yeah. And talk about glitch in the Matrix, like, I can't help but wonder, when I was in high school, 2007, 2008, I was a senior, right? They were talking about the Large Hadron Collider. Potentially, when they turn it on, we don't know, it could spark a black hole. This is why I thought about it. And I was like, well, hopefully they never turn that bad boy on, because I don't want to even risk a black hole being on Earth, right? But then you got to think, like, a lot of this weird stuff, like, I feel like it wasn't, and I guess you have been talking about like weird anomalies from like the 2000s and the 90s, but like, I don't remember ever hearing about Mandela effects until arguably after the Large Hadron Collider was turned on. Maybe there was a little bit of a separation of a dimensional shift. What's your take? And did you think that Mandela died in the 90s?
So I really haven't looked into it.
Have you heard about these at all?
Yeah, they call it the glitch in the matrix too. That was kind of why I wanted to see what I don't know. I mean, movies have been made about it.
Yeah.
And I haven't given it much thought. So I'm just not too familiar with the subject.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess, to wrap up here, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you feel would be relevant to the conversation or interesting to kind of add in?
Oh gosh, I think we covered everything.
Okay.
Today. Yeah, we went all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's my goal as always. So if someone wants to follow up with more of your research or maybe even potentially hear you speak about some of these things about Skinwalker Ranch, where can they go? Where can they find more information?
Sure. So I have a author page on Amazon. You can look it up through James Keenan. There's a lot of James Keenan, like Maynard James Keenan. But I'm the only one that has an author page on Amazon. You can find, I update it every so often. My books are on there. I will be speaking at the UFO Mega Conference in Laughlin, Nevada. That's going on live June 6th through the 12th. And you can also get it online. And I'll be speaking on Wednesday. Also, Dwayne Ollinger from Blind Frog Ranch will be speaking after me, and there'll be two other speakers that are from two other locations that have similar events occurring that day. So you can do that, and then just kind of keep a lookout is all I can say for some shows coming out soon. I might pop up on an episode or two here and there.
Okay.
On a couple of different channels.
What channels?
I can't even... I can't even say that.
So we'll just
right
keep
now,
our eyes peeled.
Yeah, they haven't come out yet, or so.
Okay.
But again, a great thing. Season 2 of Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is coming out May 4th. So hint, hint.
Yeah. Okay.
Keep an eye out, and a few other shows coming up. But yeah, I'll try to update that on Amazon for everybody, or on my Facebook page. I have one under James Keenan, and then also one under Dark Shadows and Catastrophe.
Okay, perfect. And if there's any links or anything, I can go ahead and add those to the description. So just email them to me, and we'll include those below the video. But thank you so much for coming on. This was a pleasure getting to speak with you and pick your brain on some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
cool.
you.
All right, guys, peace out.